Hi, Karen Alari here. Today we're going to be talking about color mixing and using a limited palette. This is actually an excerpt for one of my online courses called Fall Color, and there'll be info on the screen if you're interested in that course. So today we're going to use a limited palette of ultramarine blue, naphthol red light, Hansa yellow medium, and of course titanium white. And I'll show you how you can get all the colors you need for this particular painting, but you can translate that to any painting you might be working on. You can use this same process before you start your painting, and it'll give you a really good basis and confidence in your color mixing as you go forward. So I hope you enjoy the little video today. Talk to you later. So the first thing I like to do before I start a painting is to just play with the color a little bit, get to know how these different shades mix together, and spend some time studying my reference photo. So I have my reference photo up here above my easel where I can see it clearly, and I'm just going to think about how am I going to get those colors that I see in the reference photo. I see oranges, yellows, golds, reds, browns, purples. Let's play a little bit and see what how we're gonna do that. So I've got over here my palette, my water, my reference photo, my paper towels, and we're all ready to go. I'm using a flat brush. It's about a ½ inch wide or so. You don't want anything too small because all we're going to be doing is just mixing and doing little swatches of color. Got my water here, ready to go. And the first thing I'm going to do, you all know about the color wheel, you know, red, yellow, blue, primary, secondary colors. Well, we're going to do a little color wheel just using the paints that we're going to be using and see how it looks. So I'm going to start out today and I'm going to put yellow up here. And this is the yellow we're using. I'm just using some watercolor paper here. Rinse out a lot in between picking up your paint colors so you can get some nice pure colors to start with. So I'm just doing a little swatch of each of the colors that we have, and I'm going to put red over here, and I'm going to put red over here. I'm going to put red over here. And get enough paint on there so that it actually covers the white of the paper. And this is our ultramarine blue. So these are our primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. And I like to use a limited palette. It just makes your color mixing choices easier. And it also saves you some money because you don't have to start out and buy a whole bunch of paint colors. So we've got a red, yellow, and blue. So that's our primary colors. And then yellow and red is going to be our secondary colors. So the first thing you're going to notice when you're mixing your yellow and red, and there's a lot of orange in our painting, so we're going to be using this orange mixture quite a bit. But what you'll notice is it's not an even 50-50 mix. So I don't use half red and half yellow to make an orange. There's a whole lot more yellow that goes into that mix to make it look orange. So if I put this over here, and here's an orange, and I chose this color palette partly because this red and this yellow are nice and clear, and they're going to give us some pretty oranges. And so much of this painting is made up of orange that was a big factor in my color choices. I've chosen an ultramarine blue, which is it doesn't make as clear of color mixes. It's a little bit of a subdued blue. It's a warm blue. And so it's not going to make real bright, clear purples. It's going to make some kind of subdued purples, mixing these two together. And again, you know, you'll have to just play with that color mix until you find something that looks like purple, you know, just reads purple to you. And that reads pretty darn purple to me. I'm going to add a tiny bit of white to that just so we can see the color because it's so dark, you almost can't see the purple. Let's try a little bit more. If we can't get that purple to be obvious. There we go. Now, let's see how we're going to do with green. And again, This ultramarine blue you'll find gives you more subdued greens than say a phthalo blue. And if we were doing a spring scene, I would be using a phthalo blue instead of the ultramarine blue. And that's just something as you go along, you'll get used to what the different colors on your palette will do, and you get used to it by doing just what we're doing here, just playing and practicing. And again, that yellow is a much milder color than the blue, so I have to use a whole lot of yellow in comparison to the blue to get a green. So you see how that goes. You can come up with the tertiary colors too by mixing those together. You'd get an yellow-orange, a red-orange, a red-violet, a blue-violet, a blue-green, and a yellow-green. And all those would make up your tertiary colors. We'll be using a lot of tertiary colors as we paint, and primary and secondary colors. But the reason I want to make sure you get a little bit of a color wheel up here is a very important part of mixing your colors is that some of them are more subdued. We call that neutralized, like the one in the back here. As you go back from our brighter oranges in the front and we go back in the hillsides, the ones in the back are more subdued colors. We call that neutralized. And you'll hear me talk about that a lot. I say, now let's mix ourselves a neutralized purple or a neutralized orange. And the way you neutralize a color is you go straight across the color wheel and you mix a tiny bit of the complementary color. So straight across the color wheel is the complementary colors. So if I'm trying to neutralize an orange, I'm going to add a tiny bit of blue to that. If I'm trying to neutralize a red, I'm going to add a little bit of green to that. So whatever's directly across is going to help you neutralize or gray down those colors a little bit. Theoretically, if you mixed half and half of these and got right to the center, you'd have a pure gray. Given that pigments are all a little different, it's usually more of a muddy brown depending on which pigments you're using. But the important point to get out of that is to neutralize a color, to make it less vibrant, less chromatic. You'll hear me saying that a lot. If a color's straight out of the tube like these, they're very chromatic colors, they're very rich and pure. So if you want to neutralize them, you're going to go across the color wheel. So this is a good reference to have as you're painting our little painting today. So the next thing we're going to do is look at our reference photo and see if we can't pick out some of these oranges and violets and reds and see how we're going to mix those. So the first thing that I would probably do is start with some of this orange. Let's make a little more orange here. Okay, so if I do an orange like this, and I'm looking up here into my reference photo, and I'm realizing that there's very few areas that are going to be that chromatic, that rich in color. Most of those are going to be slightly neutralized a little bit. So what happens if I neutralize that orange? See how tiny of a bit? I just use the very corner of my brush and just get a tiny bit of that blue, because a tiny bit goes a long way when it comes to neutralizing. Your biggest problem with, or challenge with this painting will be not to have your oranges go into sort of a greeny putty color. You don't want them to do that. So now you see how that orange is a little more neutralized than that one? Now, the way you make the colors lighter is to add a little white. So do that, get yourself some orange up there, and do a couple of shades of white. See how light you can go. And you'll notice when you're doing this, the lighter you go with the color also gets a little more cool. It doesn't stay the exact same tone. It starts getting cooler and cooler as you go. And that's because titanium white is a cool white, and so it affects the colors by making them cooler. And this kind of becomes a problem when you're trying to lighten up an area like when you're doing the lighter areas of these bushes where the sun's hitting them a little bit more, you'll find that, and I don't know if you can see over here in the painting, but you'll find that as you go lighter, you see how that's also gone really neutral and cooler, whereas things that are in sunlight are actually going to be warmer. So as you mix, say we're back to just mixing a straight orange here. Let's mix some more of our orange. Let's put our orange there. And then we want to go lighter with our orange. You see how when you go lighter and lighter, it gets cooler and cooler. So what you're going to have to do is also add a tiny bit of yellow as you go lighter. And by doing that, you can keep your orange lighter, but it shows sunlight. You see the difference between those? One is cooler and one is warmer. So the lighter you go, as you add white to adjust your colors, don't just add white, but also add a little bit of yellow or a little bit of red, depending on the color, in order to get it to stay warm. Okay? So the purples in here are very neutralized. And if you go back to our color wheel, if I want to neutralize a purple, I'm going to add yellow to it, right? So again, tiny bit to start with. If you add too much, you're just going to go straight into a brown. And you don't necessarily want to do that. And it isn't to say either that you only can use 2 colors to make a mix. Obviously, you can use 3 colors, 5 colors, whatever amount of colors that you want. So this is a more neutralized purple. Let's see. I think I did that. Let me try this again. Let's take some red and some blue. Okay, and we're looking to get those light shades in the background. It's mostly where the purple is showing up. Well, that's an interesting purple. Let's just put it up there and take a look at that. That's a purple we can get. Now if we add a little more blue to that, we get more of a blue purple. Let's try that one. That's a pretty one too. And now if I want to neutralize that, add a tiny bit of yellow. If you add too much, you'll end up with sort of a mucky greeny color. Okay, that's a little more neutralized than that. All we've done is add a little bit of yellow. So if I add white to that, it's going to look like this. So that's what we've done there, is add some lighter and lighter colors until we can get way back into the distance, and really the sky itself is going to be a very light purple color. And we'll try to see how light we can get it here. Trying to get some of this darker stuff off. Okay, see how light we can go. We've also got some kind of red colors. So here's our red that we're using, and it's very bright red. And we want to look at trying to get some of these darker, almost purpley reds that are in that foreground. So let's add just a little bit of our ultramarine blue to that red and see what we get. Oh, that's a nice kind of a winey red color. That ought to work really well up here. And then if we want some slightly lighter versions of that, we can add a little bit of red and some yellow to get some of these lighter versions of these foreground leaves in these trees. One thing that's going to be important in this painting in terms of color are these greens. Study your reference photo a little bit and look at those greens. What we have to be super careful of is not to get them too bright. So if we came in there with a green like this that is straight out of our color wheel, just our red and our blue, it's going to be too bright. It's going to be too bright and too cool, and it's not going to fit. It's going to look more like a spring green than a fall green. So what are we going to do to neutralize our green and make it a little more earthy in tone? Well, we're going to look at our color wheel, and across from the green is the red. So red is what you're going to use to neutralize a green. So if I just take a tiny bit, again, use tiny little bits when you're working on neutralizing a color. Now if I add a little red to that, I get much more of a khaki kind of a green. And that's the kind of greens that we actually see here in the painting, are these more kind of khaki greens. When we get into this layer right there, they are a little bit cooler and a little bit bluer. Why? Because of atmospheric perspective, we're moving back into the picture plane, so they're going to be bluer. So you can add a little bit of blue to that and a little bit of white to that and get something that's a little more neutral but a little more blue. I hope that gives you some great ideas on how to prepare for your next painting using a limited palette and give you some confidence with your color mixing. Be sure to join me on my website and in my online school, and we will talk to you later.